Good Monday morning, everybody. I am Angie Callen, and this is No More Mondays, the podcast where we believe you can have a thriving career or business and an amazing life on your terms. And it is my job to bring you guests who not only prove that fact, but have great resources to help you live and work more authentically. I am already smiling because this is going to be a really good one. Sebastian Rusk is here, and he and I had about a podcast worth of conversation before I even hit record. And we're going to cover a new topic today we haven't talked about on the podcast, and that is podcasts. Because I hear podcasts suck if you don't have one, or so says today's guest, Sebastian Rusk. He is a podcast launch strategist, podcast coach, speaker, and comedian, which is why you should watch out, world, because you have no idea where the two of us are about to take this conversation. Sebastian helps marketers and entrepreneurs go from idea to live podcast in as few as 90 days. And he's here to tell you why you should consider doing just that if you don't already have a podcast. And if you do have a podcast, maybe we'll throw you a bone or two as well. So help me welcome Sebastian Rusk to the show. Sebastian, welcome to No More Mondays.
Angie Callen, always a pleasure. What's happening?
Yeah. So I got to give everybody a little backstory. Sebastian and I actually have met in person recently after our worlds collided through multiple different networking channels. So the entrepreneurial world, the podcast world is oddly small. And he and I got to meet face to face a few months ago. We were both speakers at this thing called The Thing. And I can promise you the two of us yucked it up in a corner a little bit. So we're going to have some fun today. And I want to kick it off by just, Sebastian, why do podcasts suck if you don't have one?
Because podcasting will radically change your life and your business if you let it.
Tell me more.
Who do you get to become because you make a decision to become a podcaster? What's possible with that? What does that look like for your business? What does that look like for you as a human being? What does that look like for your network? What does that look like for your communication skills? These are all things that some of us may consider one or two of those things, but do we rarely consider all of those things? Who do I get to become? Can I grow my business? Can I become a better communicator? Oh, and by the way, can I get my content game in check and consistent because of the podcast? So those are all things that I've been able to unpack over the past 9 years of helping people on the journey of going from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less, launching a podcast, creating something they can get excited about, and then bringing it out into the world and doing something great with it.
I love idea to iTunes. And I think there's a piece in there. There's several things you rattled off I want to kind of dig around into, but I think there's also this idea of just like rip off the damn Band-Aid and do it, right? Instead of like overthinking it, being nervous. And it seems like there is some sort of like barrier to entry when it comes to podcasting that we put in our minds that I'm sure you've seen people work through in this very quick idea to iTunes methodology. So I want to hear more from you about why podcasting makes us a better whole person and some of the things that you've seen it help people kind of like overcome or improve.
Well, Angie, I'm sure you've heard the quote before. People's number one fear is public speaking. Number two is dying. So you can just riddle me that one real quick.
I don't understand either of those because I have never had a fear of public speaking and know where I'm going to go when I die. So I don't really think about either of those things, but
Same.
I can appreciate that others do.
Same. But we think that because of the way we think, maybe other people think that way, and they just don't. The whole idea of the fear of public speaking was created somewhere along the line from birth until present day. I dated a girl about 15 years ago that was scared of public speaking, but she was just starting out as an entrepreneur. And she had a group of women that wanted her to come speak, and she was terrified. And I said, where is all of this coming from? And she said, I was in a play in 5th grade, and I forgot my lines. And I came out and I said, instead of all my lines, and everybody started laughing. I go, and then you took that with you. You took that with you for the rest of your life, created this bullshit story around who you think that you are, and have been holding yourself back from what you actually know that you should be doing. Let me tell you something. There's a group of women in that room that are waiting to get something from you and to hear from you. By not going in there and delivering on that, you are being grossly negligent to that entire group and to yourself. So get in there and make it happen. That talk
That's
shifted everything, and she went in there and started speaking.
well, and the idea that you have something that you're meant to share is kind of a profound thing that aligns with a lot of the themes we talk about on No More Mondays about values alignment and having a purpose.
Yep.
And while it seems extreme to say it's grossly negligent, in a way you're holding back, it's selfish to keep that from other people. And I think what you're talking about comes down, and I want to hear what you think of this idea that it drills down to that like fundamental fear we all have of lack of acceptance or being unaccepted by our peers, by society, and getting on a stage, even if it's virtual, brings out that reality, but can also help you combat it, right?
Yeah. How many times have you done something that you didn't think that you could do, and after it, you felt great? I'll use the cold plunge as an example. I don't have a cold plunge, but it's been 50 degrees here in Miami the past couple of weeks. So the pool's probably somewhere near cold plunge worthy. So I get done with my workout. I do the sauna. Sauna's no problem for 20 minutes. Meditate with my Calm app. I'm all good. But walking out of the sauna all sweaty after 20 minutes and jumping into a pool for 5 minutes doesn't seem like the best. But you know what the best is? The payoff. It's kind of like just going to the gym in general. I will never wake up and go, I can't wait to get to the gym. My workout is my favorite part of the day. It's not. Getting done with my workout and chugging a protein shake is my favorite part of the day. Don't ever get it twisted. So we don't know what we don't know. So until we actually get in the game, do we even know if we can win the game? I mean, I know that we can't win the game unless we're in it. But if we're actively playing a role in that game, we've got a better shot of actually winning and doing something. But a phrase that I've coined, and you heard me share this in Orlando at the thing, and the reason that I talk about this often, mainly in my talks and my content, is because I was posed this question some 15 years ago when I was first getting started. And that was, who's missing out because you're not showing up? And that's a sobering question for every single person that I've asked that question to, because I can guarantee you that wherever you're not showing up in whatever area that is, someone's missing out. If you're not doing the podcast, it just takes that one thing during a podcast interview for you to say something, or during the interview for someone to take it and go change their life forever. Like, if that's not enough, like, motivation for you to be able to go, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. Well, beam me up, Scotty.
It kind of seems funny that we're going this deep in a conversation about something as seemingly simple as podcast, but it's really the doors podcast can open. So I'll give you just a couple examples and be a terrible host who starts to just talk about my experience instead of asking you questions.
Here we go.
I'm gonna do it, but flagging myself so I get permission.
Fair enough.
One of the things I have gotten out of podcasting that I didn't expect, because I didn't need to overcome a fear of speaking. I didn't necessarily need to build thought leadership, but it didn't hurt. But one of the things I've gotten out of it I didn't expect was the community and a network of people who I would not have been able to cultivate and build relationships with and have a reason to continue a conversation with had it not been that ask. So for me, that totally validates what you said about kind of the power of what it can change and what it can do even for your business, but also for my own growth potential, giving me access to people who are also there, giving everyone what they have to offer and helping them grow. So that it just validates kind of what you had to say about the power of the podcast.
It's like, that's back to the original point of, like, who do you get to become?
Yep.
Like, who do you get to become? I didn't even think about that. That's what I always say. I had a client call me a couple of years ago. I'll never forget it. She said, Sebastian, what you do has very little to do with podcasting and everything to do with life. And I thought, huh. She goes, I go, where's this coming from? And she said, remember our coaching call last week when I told you that I wasn't going to be able to make it to Dallas for that meetup because my husband's assistant, who's also our nanny, couldn't travel with us. And you said, hold on a second. The nanny can't travel, so you can't go out of town. Oh, so why can't the nanny just stay home with the kids? She goes, do you expect me to leave town and leave my kids with a nanny? I go, do you trust this nanny? Yes. I go, what's the difference of the nanny watching the kid in Dallas or watching the kid in Florida? She goes, I guess there is no difference. I said, so how much longer are you going to live in this made up scenario that you've created for yourself that's obviously complicating your life and business? And I got so far into her head about that. She called me from a personal development event a couple weeks after, telling me what I do has very little to do with podcasting. And it was a Saturday night at like 6 p.m. and she was bawling her eyes out. And she said, Sebastian, I just had the most incredible breakthrough. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I'm like, what happened? She said, my mom died. My grandmother raised me. And I carried all of this guilt that my grandmother put her life on hold to raise me. And none of that was true. I said, no, you allowed your grandmother to do exactly what she wanted to do. And as your mother looked down, watching it all unfold, she was I could only imagine, filled with an extreme amount of joy, seeing how the story ended up playing out. Thank God grandma was there. And that was it. Things started to shift. And when that started to happen, and I'm like, okay, we out here changing lives now, y'all. I'm not changing lives. You're changing your own life. I'm a vessel and vehicle to be able to call out some blind spots for you so you can better understand what you don't know that you don't know. But when that started to happen, I was like, oh, wait a second. Podcasting is just a vehicle.
Yes.
What we get to
Catalyst.
become. Right. Correct.
Absolutely. And I tell that to other coaches a lot. I'm like, we change lives, and it feels like a really audacious thing to quote unquote own or claim. But when a client says that to you, just like your situation, like you changed my life, you realize it's more than the tactical and the fundamental. There's an inspiration layer there. And it's funny that you brought in something we were talking about backstage before we came on, which is this idea of, podcast is about storytelling. And we really have to pay attention to the stories that we tell ourselves and whether or not they're true, and whether these deep-rooted belief systems that we have developed since we were, in fifth grade and got laughed off stage because we said all have a place in our lives anymore. And while this is a departure from the topic of podcasting, in a way, it's what opens people up to thinking differently, right?
Yeah, it really, really is. I mean, we are interpretation machines as human beings. That means we make shit up all day, every day. And the most terrifying part is that it's on autopilot. So you got to keep it in check. Otherwise, the story runs the show. So back to the original example I gave of, saying on stage and her carrying that entire, it happens early on. You heard me say this in Orlando. Somewhere along the line, someone told you that you couldn't do something and you believed them. And then you took it a step further and you created a story around that you made up. And then you took a step further above that and you started enrolling other people, and you weren't done there. You started living your life according to that and believing it, a story that isn't even true. So when we evaluate that, and that's personal development 101, I don't care if it's Tony Robbins, the Landmark Forum, or whatever it may be, it is what happened in our story of what happened. And too many times we mix those two together and it creates the chaos that becomes our life, because that's not what really happened. My story is my parents got divorced. That's it. Everything above and beyond that's bullshit. Yeah, but my mom did. And no. My parents got divorced. That's it. My parents did the best they could do with the resources they had at the time. But for 35 years, I blamed dad and the wife he married. And where was mom for this? But I was with this. And once I was able to break free from that story that wasn't even true, I set myself free. I stepped into my power. I forgave my parents, because I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but after 18, you're not allowed to blame anybody anymore. Just had this conversation with my daughter, who's 23, who thoroughly agrees with me. Thank God.
With that. But, you raised a good kid.
Yes. Well, I mentored her up. I put her in every personal development and women's coaching mentoring. She was surrounded by powerful women in there doing things. Thank God she had these resources there. But I said, we are going to get here, and we are breaking generational curses. We are disrupting the way things have, air quotes, always been. And you're going to take the torch and run with it. And things will never be the same ever again, because I said so. And that's a very powerful stance to have as a parent. And at 23, in fact, her and I just had a big download conversation on this past Sunday that came out of nowhere. And she said, I don't know if you remember, but this, that, and the other happened. And you got mad at me, and you were upset, and you screamed, and you were angry. And now I'm an adult, and I'm angry because of those experiences. But I'm not blaming you. And I said, you know what? You're exactly right. All of that terrible shit did happen. I was a hothead and I would yell and scream. I would say my parenting, I would yell and scream, you would cry, and here we go, ladies and gentlemen, we got a party. I said all those things did happen, and they were really shitty things that did happen. But I'll tell you this, I'm very sorry that those things happen. I just did the best that I could possibly do at that time with the resources that I had and what I knew. And with that being said, will you forgive me? And she said, yeah, I will. I said, thank you so much. I love you. I love you more than anything on this entire planet. You are my everything, my greatest accomplishment to date and forever. And I never want you to feel inferior about anything. My door is only open 365 days a year, 7 days a week, and 24 hours a day for us to have uncomfortable conversations. And she said, Dad, I love you so much. I feel so much better now. I almost canceled on us connecting next week in Texas because I was mad at you. I go, where did this come from? So I called my sister and I'm telling her about this. And I was like, on a Sunday morning, where did this come from? She said, Sebastian, it's going to show up when it shows up. And I thought, wow. How many of those conversations are we not having? I know this is not podcast related, but
is a choice. There is a very powerful word here called choice. And I think that most people, I was actually talking to this with my husband just yesterday. I think most people intentionally make the choice not to choose. They stay mediocre, they stay unhappy, they don't have joy in their life because they're not willing to have hard conversations. They're not willing to question the story and to look at it and say, do I need to carry this story forward? You have agency in your life. And while you can't do anything about the past, you can learn from it and use it to re-script things. Correct. So what has started as a podcast conversation is totally gone professional development. And I'm way more excited about this because this is what Sebastian and I do from stages and get to see each other at events. And I know we're getting fired up about a shared kind of platform here. So I love advice, and I love giving people practical takeaways that they can actually use. So while we have maybe inspired at least one person out there to change their story, I want to help them understand how. So maybe in your world, you changed your story. You confronted some of the past. You questioned, you made choice. What are some of the practical steps, or what are some practical steps people out there can do to start questioning, evaluating, and even changing their story if they realize that's something they need to do?
Step number one, ask yourself a simple question. How much longer can you go on like this? How much longer? Everything, the noise, and just the jig is up. You know what you need to do. Have the conversation, make the shift, make the new decision. We all know exactly what we need to do. It's just a matter of taking action to go and do it. Someday doesn't exist. One day doesn't exist. I think that it's if you've had the inclination that something needs to shift and change, that's reason enough to just figure it out. Now, when I was introduced to the world of personal development through the means of the Landmark Forum back in 2013, and then Tony Robbins a few years after that, and then I went through a course that was kind of a hybrid of both of those that's unfortunately no longer around. But once I was able to get through that course in 2016, my life was radically changed because I was able to go in, figure out why and what I had created, and then I was able to unpack all of that. And on the other side of that, I came out becoming 100% accountable for my life, realizing that everything that happens in my life, past, present, and future, is my fault. Nobody's fault. No finger pointing unless I'm standing in front of a mirror. And I learned how to love myself. And when you take those two things and you figure those two things out, you're able to step into your power. And when you step into your power, I leave you different because I'm Sebastian Rusk. That's no ego. That's no, I'm better than you. I'm cooler than you. I have a God-given gift. I am highly favored and anointed in this lifetime. Thank God. I'm so grateful for it. But just like we used to sing in church when I was a kid, this little light of mine.
I knew that's what you were going to say for some reason.
Yes.
Should we sing it? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Don't let Satan get out. I'm going to let it shine. Hi, Mom and Dad. I know you're so proud right now. But this goes totally back to where we started with this idea that it's grossly negligent for you to not put that power and purpose out in the world, because God gave it to you to give to someone else. And it's our job to use those gifts for others' gains. And again, to just kind of tie back into the fact that we're talking about podcasts theoretically here, that is one vehicle with which you can tell your story to help someone else. And that's really what we're talking about here, is owning your story and crafting it yourself and giving yourself permission to do that.
Yes. Give yourself permission. You hear that? Give yourself permission. We're not waiting for mom or dad or wife or husband or cousin or neighbor. We're giving ourselves permission. When Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, you think he went around going, hey guys, I'm going to create this thing. Yeah, I'm going to create this thing that's going to let you take pictures and send these things called text messages. You're going to be able to call anybody in the world at any given time. You'll be able to surf this thing called the World Wide Web. People were like, Steve, you are out of your tree. No. Steve said, I'm creating the iPhone because I said that I'm creating the iPhone. That declaration that's being made that doesn't require any permission outside of the permission that we give ourselves to make that actual declaration. Now, this is just an analogy and an example with the iPhone, but what can you declare in your life right now that you're going to do regardless of the noise outside? Because the noise doesn't matter.
Well, and I think, so I'm going to ask a question, but I want to lead into it, because the noise piece, I think, is I was actually thinking, and you and I are totally on the same page. I feel like there is a greater need, and this idea of giving yourself permission to identify that purpose, take on the power, and use your gifts is now more important than ever because of all that noise. And we almost need to, I'm a huge like authenticity platform person, and you and I are so unapologetically Sebastian and Angie. I don't know that people necessarily know what to do with us, but there is so much noise and so much inauthenticity that I feel that what we're talking about is even more important today than it kind of almost has ever been. And I'm curious on your opinion of that.
Well, I just think that we're living in a world where, hey, Angie, I'll sell you my bullshit and you sell me yours and we'll call it a deal. I just think that life is just too precious and too short. We are but a mere vapor. So how in the world could we sit here and live our lives with, I heard Simon Sinek changed my mind about small talk. I used to say I hate small talk, but Simon Sinek said, small talk isn't always bad. Small talk is sometimes a bridge to connection. It's a door opener. It creates an opportunity for a conversation. I heard that on his podcast a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, what?
You kind of just helped me a little bit, because I've always said I don't like small talk. I like to have meaningful conversations, but there's no reason small talk can't become a meaningful conversation if that's the intention behind it.
It was with
I like that.
What's his name? They used to host the Daily Show. Noah.
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah, correct. And I followed a lot of his stuff. I know he's a comedian. He's got a unique style. Obviously had his own, had his own path of success as well. But I thought it was those two meeting for a conversation was very, very interesting. And that's where I got the small talk piece from. I don't know if it was Trevor that said it or Simon that had said it, because one of them didn't like it. And I think it was Trevor was like, I don't know. I think I'm okay with small talk or Simon was like, it is a bridge to a larger, more meaningful conversation.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing about people who have podcasts is we love to connect. And that's a great way for its first level connection. But here's to go back to intention. I think one reason people don't like small talk is because we tend to be selfish about a conversation. And it's like, well, when am I going to talk about me? But if you are curious about the person you're talking to, which we have to do as podcast hosts, it kind of helps make that conversation less small talk and transition into more meaningful, finding some kind of common ground to talk about at a deeper level.
Right. Because most of us are listening to figure out what we want to say next. And when you do that as a podcast, if you do that as a podcaster, it can create mass confusion in your brain, but you're also not connecting on a deeper level with the person you're having that conversation with. I mean, podcast hosting 101 is, you should be talking 20% of the time, asking questions, and your guest should be talking 80% of the time. I learned that from the great Larry King. And I couldn't. And
the only way you can do that is if you're present to a conversation. Because if you try to hardcore script this stuff and are like, oh, Sebastian, I don't know what you just said, but here's my next question. It has nothing to do with it. You ain't going to have no flow.
Right. It's going to be like Zach Ganopoulos with Between the Two Ferns. It was a tough last name. It was great. But he, as a comedian, and of course that was like a spoof show, but like his awkwardness is what made the show, like I'll never forget him asking Brad Pitt, like, so how long have you known that you were a shitty actor?
I can't deal with super, like, I don't watch The Office. That super awkwardness makes I have a physical reaction to it to the point that I can't. And I remember when Jim tried to make me watch that crap, and I was like, oh, this is so terribly
time
awkward.
out. So for a while I was like, this is stupid. And a couple of years ago, I go, you know what? Let's give it a shot. And I was hooked like a crackhead. I was like, Steve Cottrell is genius. Like that shit would never fly in 2025 ever.
Oh, that's totally true.
But this whole sketch,
it's not that I think it's stupid. Awkward humor for me. So, okay, Sebastian and I finally found something we don't agree upon, and it's The Office. There you go. It's bound to happen sooner or later. I like that awkward humor. Schitt's Creek is my threat, is like just at the threshold. There's even a couple episodes where I'm like, I'm going to go do something while this is so awkward.
That's how I am with Friends. Like I'm just.
Yeah, I was never a big Friends fan either.
I wasn't. There you My daughter
obsessed. A whole bunch of listeners.
Right. I just was not, and it's a big, there's a whole world there with Friends on there, but the Office went downhill when Steve left, but that's just my own personal opinion on there. But, teach their own on how they consume. It was a unique approach to television and sketch comedy, I think.
Well, and I think to tie it back to everything we're talking about here, it was a unique approach. No one had really done it before, and it really formed a cult following, which just kind of proves the fact that if you put content out there in your authentic way and the way you want people to consume it, you will develop an audience.
Yeah. And it started in the UK. So this was the American version that came here and blew up and had its own popularity. I have not seen the UK version.
Oh my gosh. It's probably British humor. It's probably put me in a grave now, Sebastian. Put me in a grave now. So let's go back to the topic at hand, because I really love how this started as simply like, why do podcasts suck if you don't have one? And it's because it's holding you back if you don't have one.
Sure.
So, we talked about the professional development rabbit hole that I'm super excited we went down. But let's bring it back up really high level, or maybe more fundamental, back to podcasts. So there's somebody out there we know who's listening, who's been like, man, I've been thinking about this. I'm finally going to bite the bullet in 2025 and start a podcast. What are some very practical things that somebody can start doing to either like figure out the idea, figure out the audience, figure out the focus? Where do we begin if we want to start using this platform to tell our story?
Why are you starting a podcast? Get explicitly clear on why you're starting a podcast. Write it down, put some details underneath it, and get completely clear. Sell yourself on your own idea of why you should be starting a podcast. After that, what are you going to call the podcast, and what type of show is it going to be? Are you going to interview people? Are you going to do solo episodes? Is it going to be a hybrid? Define exactly what the format is going to be. And then once you come up with a name and a format and a brand, how is it complementing your business and your personal brand at the same time? I think those are very important things. Mm-hmm. We're living in this world of, Gary Vaynerchuk said a long time ago, one of the first things I ever learned from him was your personal brand in perpetuity is your reputation. Mm-hmm. And I never forgot that. That was one of the first things he ever told me 15 years ago. And I was like, wow, that was amazing. I never even thought about that. Now everyone's like personal brand, personal brand, personal brand. But 15 years ago, he's been beating this drum for 15 years. And I think it's very accurate. We're living in this world. You're going to have, my coach, Dan Martell, said, you're going to have your personal brand forever till you die. So why not invest in that? Because when people are like, well, should I have my business page or should I have an Instagram business page, or everything should be based from your personal brand, because people do business with people. So I think getting clear on those things. And then once you start to map those things out, find out. I got a free equipment guide over on the podcastlaunchlab.com. I'm sure you'll link to that in the show notes, of my recommendations of very basic, simple podcast equipment. You can spend a couple $100 with, or you can go Daddy Warbucks and buy the granddaddy of mics and receivers and all that if you really want to. Download the guide, figure out what resonates with you. Keep it simple. The USB, easy plug and play equipment that you can travel with a webcam, decent lighting. As long as you look good, sound good, you're good to go with a podcast. You don't need a fancy studio and all this other stuff. The only reason you should be starting a podcast is to interview people that you want to do business with and build a relationship with. The second reason is to get your content game in check. One podcast episode, multiple pieces of content. Your social media content game is in check weekly. Lastly is becoming a better communicator. Everyone wants to become a better communicator, speaking publicly, talking, creating content. As again, back to Dan Martell as well. Show your face, people. Show your face on Instagram. I want to see your face on your stories. Stop hiding from the world. People want to see your face. There's a lot of personal development that comes along with that. Now, once you have this framework laid out, now it's time to find someone to do the work. I don't care if you've got a team of VAs, if you've got a content team that supports you, or you're going to hire a professional that's going to help you get to the finish line faster. Anything but I can do it all, because you cannot do it all. You can for a certain amount of time. Exactly. You will do it all for a couple of episodes, and then it's going to start to feel like work. And when it feels like work, it's not fun. And when it's not fun, we quit. That's human nature. So get it off your plate, all of the work. Delegate. I don't care how you do it, but there's an easy way. And the reason people hire us to help them get launched is because it's a turnkey, hands-off, done-for-you solution where all they have to do is listen and record the episodes. That's it. So we specialize in busy, successful professionals, business owners, and entrepreneurs that don't have time to figure it out. Want to work with someone who knows what they're doing, can get them there yesterday, and they don't have to lift a finger. Now you're like, well, I got a team of VAs that can execute on a lot of stuff. Fantastic. We've also created a done with you solution where I tell you and your team what to do, give you all my secrets, and you go execute on that. So there are solutions available on there, but don't try to piecemeal this together. Don't put your framework all together and go, okay, cool. I got a name. I know what mic I want to use. I know why I'm doing it. I know what kind of format it's going to be. Okay, let me go hire 3 VAs, and then I'm going to teach them what I already don't know. Don't do that either. If you're already creating content with your content team and they're like, yeah, we understand and get podcasts. If someone could just teach us what to do, that's what I'm referring to. Otherwise, holler at your boy.
There you go. Boom, mic drop, shameless plug, all the things. And just to kind of, I would say, validate some of the things, starting a podcast is not rocket surgery, but there is a certain level of lift there, especially with like some one-time things that most entrepreneurs don't need to know. And then once you're doing it, in order to remain consistent, it's work. It takes time to show up and have interviews, and depending on your format and the length and editing and all those kinds of things, it can be time consuming, which is why there are some crazy statistics out there on the level of podcast success or lack thereof. What is it, like 3% of all podcasts? It might be less than that, have reached 100 episodes. So, we've hit gold status.
Yeah, I've got a stat right here that I read the other day.
I just saw it somewhere the other day and can't remember it, but
yeah,
you've got it.
Hold on a second here. Let me pull it up. Which doesn't show up right when I need it. Yeah, exactly. I like the background music going on here.
I think I need to cue up the Jeopardy music in the back end so I can play it while you're thinking. So, while Sebastian's pulling that up, because that's going to kind of wind us
down. Here we go.
Got it.
So is there already too many podcasts out there? All right, let's talk about current podcast stats for a minute. Spotify says there's around 4 million podcasts. Apple says there's around 2.5 million podcasts. So let's just call it 3 million active podcasts. Out of those 3 million, how many are publishing once a month? 300,000. And of those out of those 300,000, how many are publishing once a week? 150,000. So your competition as a podcaster is 150,000.
I'm already ranked at least 1,499, 999. Boom. There you go.
I think consistency is key. I think Hermosi posted something last year about if you want to be in the top 10% of podcasters, publish 20 episodes, because most people never get there.
And I don't, what am I? I'm 170 something. I don't know. But I can validate that not only is there way more space to play in this sandbox that it feels like once you actually look at the numbers and the reality, there is clearly a business case for podcasting. But I think what Sebastian and I hopefully landed on here for all of you today is the amount of personal growth that can come out of doing something that seems so simplistic, and what it can help you do, what it can help you develop, what it can help you grow, and how it can help you impact others, plus the conversations and the people that you get to meet. It's a lot of work, but it's a couple hours a week that is more than worth the time for what it's helped me be able to do. And I wouldn't be sitting here with, my new friend if that wasn't the case. So I agree. Podcasts suck if you don't have one.
Your words, my words. I'm just agreeing.
You said it. I didn't. I just have it plastered all over the internet and some T-shirts.
Well, it's actually the name of my book. So I wrote a book in 2020 called Podcasts Suck. If you don't have one, and it's all my secrets, air quotes.
There you go.
It's my entire
shameless plug number 2. Everybody go get it.
My whole process, wherever books are sold. Send me a DM on Instagram. I'll send you a free copy on Audible.
There you go, everybody. And speaking of which, as we wind things down, follow Sebastian. Whether you want to have a podcast, don't have a podcast, think it sucks if you don't, all the things, even in addition to podcasting, there's a lot of kind of development, growth, and inspiration that's going to come if you track this guy down, including books. He's got a podcast called Beyond the Story Podcast. How appropriate is that? I think we alluded to why. Actually, I'm going to ask you one more question and put you on the spot.
Sure.
So when I asked you for advice on people who might want to start a podcast, the number one first thing to do was figure out why you want to start a podcast. So why did you want to start a podcast?
I wanted to get in front of people that I wanted to do business with. And I wanted to meet guys like Gary Vee. Like Gary Vee would have never become my mentor in 2010 had I not been able to get in front of him and interview him. Luckily, it was through one of his book stops when his second book came out here in Miami, and everything just worked out. And got lined up. So we ended up spending like an hour and a half together, like in person. But that would have never happened had I not reached out and been like, hey, can I interview you? And at that time, this was 2013. Nobody knew who Gary was, really. I mean, some people did.
I was saying you got lucky. Well, not lucky, but it was good timing. The timing was right. Yeah.
Right. I always knew that. And I never knew that, well, here we are 15 years later, and I'm teaching people to start a podcast so you can get in front of people you want to build a relationship with.
Full circle. There you go. And that's I would say that would be my number one is you never know who you're going to bring into your inner circle through this kind of podcasting and how they're going to help you get to the next level of growth. It's one of the reasons I like having this guy in my circle. We've got some fun things we're going to work on together and keep each other accountable. And I'm super glad you were here to share your wisdom and give some practical knowledge out there and maybe some inspiration at the same time as we just continue to kick off 2025 here on No More Mondays podcast. So Sebastian Rusk, everybody, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Angie. It's my absolute pleasure. You're an absolute joy to have a conversation with all the time, but only in days that end in Y.
Okay. Well, hey, I think I'm shooting 90% there. So tune into his show, Beyond the Story Podcast.com is where you can find out more about that. Follow him on LinkedIn at Podcast Suck, as you can hear on the screen. Books. He has kind of all the things and is all the places. So tons of places where you can get wisdom from Sebastian Rusk is why I love having him in my inner circle. Thank you again for joining me today on No More Mondays. And for everybody out there listening, I'll see you next week for another edition of No More Mondays podcast.